You know that quiet moment when something feels off, but you can't quite explain it yet. That's exactly how this whole nightmare began. It wasn't a loud argument, no dramatic confrontation, nothing obvious at all. Just a simple envelope sitting in the mailbox. A water bill. But not just any bill. This one was nearly 3 times higher than usual. At first, I actually laughed. I thought, okay, this has to be a mistake. I live alone. I work most of the day, and I barely even use water besides basic stuff. No pool, no excessive gardening, nothing crazy. But the number didn't lie. So I checked everything, faucets, pipes, toilets. Even left the house completely silent for a while, just to listen. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The water meter outside was still moving, slowly, but constantly, even when nothing in my house was running. Now, if you've ever owned a home, you know that's not normal. That's the kind of thing that instantly puts you on edge. My first thought, a hidden leak underground. And trust me, that's not cheap. I started imagining thousands of dollars in repairs. Torn up lawn, weeks of stress, but something didn't feel right. Leaks don't usually behave this consistently. It felt controlled, almost like someone was using the water instead of it just leaking out. That's when curiosity turned into suspicion. So the next morning, I decided to run a little test. I shut off the main water valve inside my house completely. No water should be flowing anywhere now, right? Wrong. I walked outside, heart pounding a little faster than I'd like to admit, and checked the meter again. Still moving. At that point, I knew this wasn't a plumbing issue. This was something else, something intentional, and suddenly, all the small things I had ignored before started coming back to me, especially my neighbor. The one everyone in the HOA quietly complained about, but never confronted. The one with the perfectly maintained rose garden that always seemed just a little too perfect. I had noticed her sprinklers running at odd hours, sometimes even when it hadn't been her scheduled day. But I never thought much of it. Until now. So I decided to follow the only lead I had, the irrigation line. I started tracing where the pipes ran along the side of my yard, slowly moving closer to the fence that separated my property from hers. And that's when I saw it. Something partially buried, carefully hidden, but definitely not supposed to be there. A connection, a line that didn't belong to me, but was very clearly connected to my water supply. At that moment, everything clicked. This wasn't an accident. Someone had been stealing my water, for who knows how long, and I already had a very strong feeling about exactly who it was. Have you ever had that moment where you know the truth, but you still wish you were wrong? That's exactly how I felt standing there, staring at that illegal connection. Because deep down, I already knew who did it. There was only one person who would have the audacity, and honestly, the attitude to pull something like this. My HOA neighbor, the same woman who once complained that my trash bin was visually offensive, the same one who acted like she owned the entire street, and now, apparently, she thought she owned my water too. But here's the thing, I didn't confront her, not yet. Most people would have marched straight over, knocked on the door and started a full-blown argument. And trust me, I was tempted. But something told me to wait, to think. Because if someone is bold enough to secretly tap into your water line, they're also the kind of person who will deny everything, twist the story, and somehow try to make you look like the problem. And in an HOA neighborhood, that can turn ugly real fast. So instead of reacting emotionally, I decided to observe. For the next 2 days, I paid very close attention. I kept checking the water meter at different times. Early morning, afternoon, even late at night. And every single time her sprinklers turned on, guess what? The meter started spinning faster. Not a coincidence. Not even close. This was direct proof. She wasn't just stealing a little water. She had built her entire beautiful rose garden on my bill. And honestly, that's what made it worse. Because while I was stressing about an insane bill, thinking I might have a serious plumbing issue, she was out there watering her roses, probably admiring how perfect everything looked. It wasn't just theft, it was entitlement. Pure, shameless entitlement. Now at this point I had 2 options. Option 1, confront her, start drama, involve the HOA, and spend weeks dealing with complaints, meetings, and headaches. Or option 2, handle it my own way, quietly, smartly, and in a way she would never forget. And that's when an idea hit me, not out of anger, but out of pure creativity. If she wanted to use my water so badly, then maybe it was time I decided what kind of water she gets. What would you do if you had the perfect chance to teach someone a lesson without saying a single word? No arguments, no drama, just pure silent revenge. Because at this point, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was focused. I had proof, I had control. And now I had a plan. That same evening, I went to a local store and picked up a few things. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just unexpected. The kind of stuff no one would ever think twice about on its own. But combined, let's just say it would create a very memorable result. I spent the night setting everything up carefully, making sure it only affected one specific line, the one leading straight to her precious rose garden. Not my house, not anywhere else, just hers. The next morning, everything looked completely normal. Sun shining, birds chirping, her garden looking as perfect as ever. And right on schedule, her sprinklers turned on. I stood by my window, coffee in hand, watching quietly like it was just another ordinary day. At first, nothing seemed different. Water sprayed across the roses, soaking the soil just like always. But then, about 10 minutes later, something started to change. At first it was subtle, so subtle that if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it completely. The bright, healthy green leaves started to look slightly off, not dead, not dry, just different. Then the petals, those perfectly red roses she was so proud of, began shifting in color. A strange, unnatural tint creeping in slowly. Pink, then darker, then something closer to purple. And that wasn't even the best part, because soon after, the smell started. Not strong at first, just a faint, weird odor in the air. But within minutes, it grew into something absolutely impossible to ignore. A thick, sour, almost rotten smell that spread across the yard. The kind of smell that makes you stop, wrinkle your nose, and instantly wonder, what on earth is that? And right on cue, she came outside. At first, she looked confused, then concerned, then completely horrified. She walked straight into her garden, looking around, in disbelief as her once perfect roses were now turning a bizarre shade of purple, while an awful smell filled the air around her. And me? I just stood there, watching silently, because for the first time, she was finally noticing something was wrong. Have you ever seen someone go from confident to completely panicked in seconds? Because that's exactly what happened next, and honestly, it was impossible to look away. One moment she was standing there, frozen, trying to process what she was seeing, and the next, she was in full damage control mode. She rushed toward the sprinklers, frantically trying to turn them off, but by then it was too late. The water had already done its job. She dropped to her knees, grabbing the roses, inspecting them like she could somehow reverse what was happening. But the more she touched them, the worse it got. The color had fully changed now, a deep, unnatural purple, and that smell, it had spread across the entire yard. It wasn't just noticeable anymore, it was overwhelming. And then came the shouting. At first it was just confused yelling, calling out into the air like someone might magically answer her. But within seconds that confusion turned into anger. She started looking around, scanning the neighborhood, trying to figure out who was responsible. And then her eyes locked onto my house. For a moment everything went still. You could literally see the suspicion forming in her mind. The way she narrowed her eyes, the way she stood up slowly. It was like she knew, or at least she felt like she knew. And just like that she stormed over toward my door. Now this was the moment most people would dread. A full confrontation. Loud, messy, unpredictable. She knocked, no, banged on my door like she was trying to break it down. I opened it calmly, like I had no idea what was going on. And before I could even say a word, she exploded. "What did you do to my garden?" No hello, no hesitation. Straight to accusation. I looked at her, genuinely calm, and said, "Your garden." That one line completely threw her off. For a second, she didn't know how to respond. Because in that simple question, there was a message, a reminder. something she wasn't expecting me to say out loud. She tried to recover quickly, stumbling over her words, pointing back toward her yard, talking about the color, the smell, how everything was ruined. But now the tone had changed. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was panic, because deep down, she was starting to realize something much worse than ruined roses. If I knew about the garden, then I probably knew about the water too. Isn't it funny how quickly confidence disappears when the truth starts catching up? Because standing there at my door, she wasn't the same person anymore. The loud, controlling HOA neighbor was now nervous, defensive, and very, very careful with her words. You could actually see it, that moment when everything clicks in someone's mind, when they realize they've been caught, and there's no clean way out. I let the silence sit for a second, just enough to make her uncomfortable. Then I calmly said, "You know, it's strange. My water bill tripled recently." That was it. No accusations, no shouting, just a simple statement. And her reaction instant. Her face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The kind of change you only notice if you're looking for it. The kind that says, he knows. She tried to speak, tried to form some kind of explanation, but nothing came out right, because what could she even say? That connecting her garden to my water line was a misunderstanding. Exactly. So I continued, still calm, still controlled. I mentioned the meter, the constant flow, the extra line I happened to find, and with every word, she got quieter, smaller. The anger was completely gone now, replaced by something much more satisfying: accountability. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. Instead, she switched tactics, quickly apologizing, blaming confusion, saying she thought it was a shared line, anything to soften the situation. But it was too late for that, because this wasn't just about water anymore. It was about the principle. So I gave her two options. Option one, I take the evidence to the HOA and the city. You file a formal complaint and let them handle it, which would likely mean fines, penalties, and a very public embarrassment. Or option two, she fixes everything immediately, removes the connection, pays back every extra cent on my water bill, and makes sure this never happens again. And most importantly, we forget this ever happened. She didn't even hesitate. Within hours, that illegal line was gone. By the next day, she had already arranged to cover the full bill. No arguments, no attitude, just quiet compliance. And her garden? Let's just say, it took a long time to recover. The color eventually faded. But that smell, it lingered just enough to remind her, and honestly, everyone else nearby, that something had gone very, very wrong. And me? I never raised my voice, never started a fight. But somehow, I got the last word anyway.